Hey everybody, I'm Jason, and this is Jay's Project Garage. Man, we got a lot of stuff to cover. It's still cold in here. I got the fire going. It's getting better, but whew, I think when I woke up it was well, it was like 40 outside, but the shop was like a refrigerator because I only heat it when I'm out here, so it holds cold. Horrible. Let's see. So this weekend's come or this weekend's videos are going to be all about comments, and there's going to be more than one because I got a lot of stuff I got to cover. I need to start writing this stuff down. One is for Frank. He was asking about headers and exhaust tubing sizes and all that kind of stuff, so I'm going to cover that. One is going to be on EGR valves and how they work and how to diagnose them and all that kind of stuff. And another one, I think, if I get to the third one, is going to be my pea brain trying to wrap itself around the science of the piston flip and what I think might be happening. And I'm going to kind of explain how the engine works and all that kind of stuff, so you can kind of put it in perspective and maybe try to form your own opinion. Problem is I don't have a dyno. I don't really have access to a dyno. And I don't have access to a bunch of different camshafts and intakes and all that kind of stuff to try a bunch of different stuff. So all I can really do is theorize. But we're gonna try that. Oh, and I have a video that's in the bank. It's only like 6.5 minutes long. Might be a little controversial. Well, maybe not. I mean, I think I share the same opinion of a lot of people, but I may try to put that one out today too. So there's a possibility, a slim possibility, that there are going to be 4 videos that I'm going to drop over the course of this week. So make sure you like and subscribe and stick around because there's a lot of stuff coming. But this video is going to be all about exhaust. We're going to go from exhaust manifold headers to equal length shorties to long tubes. Stay tuned. So we've talked about it before, and everything in manufacturing is a compromise. This part's no different. They have to be able. This has to be warrantyable. It has to last for hundreds of thousands of miles. These won't rust out. They really don't have leak problems unless the stud breaks or it overheats and warps, or it takes a lot to hurt one of these. Back in the day, they had problems with them cracking. Not so much anymore. And a lot of the OEs have gone to, I just hit my hat. Do you see all that dust go flying? A lot of the OEs have gone to a header type manifold. Not really anybody uses cast iron exhaust manifolds anymore. These other ones flow better. And they're not trying to get all out horsepower. They're trying to improve efficiency, and that's exactly what those do. So those cast iron exhaust manifolds were great for packaging. They were super easy for them to hook exhaust to and everything. They wouldn't warp or change that much with heat, so they wouldn't have to worry about an exhaust leak developing after the car was running. They worked great for decades and decades and decades. And then they went to headers. But we're not here to talk about OE stuff. We're here to talk about performance. I'm not going to get into theory, really, on the difference between an equal and unequal length shorty. I have my opinions. Everybody can have their own opinion. I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit to having an equal length shorty over just a standard one. The drawback is try to get a set of plug wires through that mess compared to that. But these really aren't the end-all be-all for performance. They are better than exhaust manifolds, but they won't touch a long tube. And everybody says, well, you know, equal length or shorty headers will make more low-end torque than a long tube. Well, that's been disproven. Packaging is really the only reason I would ever use a shorty header. if that's the only thing I can get. They work. They're not max effort, but they do work. I'll use a long tube header anywhere and everywhere I can. They are more expensive than a shorty header, but save up for an extra week or whatever and get what your car actually needs instead of compromising and not being happy with it in the end. So that's it as far as headers stuff goes. Now in other videos we're going to talk about my opinions on tri-Y headers and all that kind of stuff. There's opinions flying all over the internet about tri-Ys don't work, but every serious race engine, NASCAR included, uses a tri-Y style header. And there's a reason for that. The only ones that don't are drag racing applications, forced induction, that kind of stuff, but high RPM, roundy round and road race and all that kind of stuff, they use tri-Y headers, and there's a very specific reason for it. But we'll talk about all that stuff in another video. So Frank, as far as your stuff's concerned, I don't concern myself a whole lot with what happens after the header. Let me clarify that. Now, tubing diameter of the primaries on the header, let me go grab one, I'll show you. These are the BBK long tubes for the 91, for the 351 swap. I've got a set of long tubes kicking around here somewhere that aren't ceramic coated, or they're just standard 302 headers, but it doesn't really matter. So for tubing diameter, this is where it starts becoming a little more important. So I've seen headers as small as 1.5 inch primary tube diameters for 302s. And it's pretty restrictive. The smallest I would go on a 302 is 1 5/8 inches. These are 1 3/4 inches, and these aren't max effort at all. I've seen them up to 2 inch diameter for small block stuff. Now yours is a little bit different because it's got pretty big exhaust ports. So I'm not sure, probably 1 7/8 inches, maybe, primary tube diameter. Contrary to the rumor that's gone around for decades about back pressure, your engine needs back pressure to run. That's 100% false. I want to get the exhaust out of the engine. The more exhaust that's still in it, that's the less air and fuel, fresh air and fuel I'm getting in. So as the piston's coming up, it's trying to push the exhaust out. If there's any restriction whatsoever, some of those gases are going to be left in the combustion chamber, and that is less air fuel, fresh air fuel that can come in for the next combustion cycle. So I want to get that stuff out. That's why when I'm porting a set of small block Ford heads, I'll concentrate a whole bunch on the exhaust side and try to get it to flow as freely as I possibly can. Now we're just talking about exhaust. We're not talking about the intake stuff yet. We'll talk about that in another video. So I want to match the tubing diameter as close as I can to the exhaust port size, and maybe go just a little bit bigger, because that never hurts, to get the exhaust out of the engine. Header length and all that kind of stuff matters too. The collector style matters, and the length of the pipe behind the collector also matters. I think the rule of thumb is about 16 or 8, I think it's 18 inches. Past 18 inches beyond the header, I don't really concern myself with it a whole lot. I just make sure that it's not a restriction. And for yours, I think 2.5 inch exhaust would be fine, because you're not going to be revving the thing 7,000 RPM. So I think 2.5 inch exhaust would be fine. I was really hoping this video was going to be better than this. I had all kinds of ideas. I think I'm dropping the ball. Let's regroup. Try again. Okay. Let's see what I can do. The benefit of a long tube header over an exhaust manifold or a shorty header is going to be scavenging. And it's the design of the collector. Hold on, let me grab it. I'm getting old and these things are heavy. So for real, serious, all-out racing applications, these things are going to have a pretty long collector on them. There's lots of videos talking about this stuff, but the gist of it is, that when this, let's say this tube exits, it's creating a vacuum on the tube next to it. The collector designs are all different and everything, and this is getting into a little bit of the tri-Y theory. But when an exhaust pulse passes by, it'll create a vacuum in another tube, and it's going to help pull the exhaust out of that other cylinder. Now, the collector needs to be a certain length to make that happen, and it's 16 or 18 inches. I'd have to look it up because I honestly don't remember. I very rarely ever run open headers on anything. All my stuff, street cars. Shorties don't have a collector like this. They depend on the exhaust tubing. See how short all this really is just a merge for all the tubes to come together, the primaries. It's got a really, really short collector on it, and then it goes into the exhaust. And a lot of times, because of packaging, the exhaust will take a sharp bend. So you want the collector to be fairly straight so it evens out the vacuum from one primary to another. The shorter that is, the less effective it's going to be. Now really all this is an improvement over the factory one. It'll bolt to the factory H pipe, and it will get exhaust out of the engine better than the stock one will, primarily because the tube diameters are a little bit different. And the theory behind the equal lengths is that what's happening in the collector is going to be more even between all 4 cylinders on that side. Real serious race car stuff on long tube headers, they'll try to get the primary tubes as close to the same length as they possibly can. You guys all know how a siphon works, or a vacuum. If you have a tube with another tube over the top of it with a hole, if you blew compressed air through that top tube, it would create a vacuum on this one. You could actually stick your finger to it, or you could pull liquid up and shoot it out the other end. I've seen a lot of guys on YouTube making, what are those things called, airsoft? They'll take like a bottle, put a bunch of airsoft things in it, and you can use compressed air. You hit it with compressed air and it'll actually draw the airsoft things out and shoot them out the end. Well, that's the same thing that's happening in your exhaust, especially with tri-Ys. Those things are tuned so that a primary tube that goes into another one, or the two that merge, fire one after the other. So that as one fires, it's pulling the exhaust from the next one. Does that make sense? It's creating a vacuum. It's pulling exhaust out of the next cylinder. So you have on a V8, you'll have 2 cylinders that are wide, and then those two tubes will wide together before the collector. And it's all to create a vacuum, and it's for higher RPM stuff. And there's a very specific reason for it. And I think we'll be covering that in a video about the piston flip thing when I talk about how engines work. So Frank, did I make that as clear as mud? Probably not. You're using long tube headers, that's awesome. Huge improvement over your exhaust manifolds. You're actually gonna be able to get the exhaust out of the engine. And getting the exhaust out of the engine is gonna make it so that you can actually tune the thing. Because I think you said you were running into the factory exhaust. Super restrictive. You made this air pump that's way more efficient, and you're trying to push all of that through a crazy straw. Free it up. Your engine's not huge. Sounds like it's a pretty decent combo. We already talked about the camshaft thing. But you want to get the exhaust out. And honestly, I think the extra money that you would spend on the 3-inch would kind of be a waste. I think 2.5 would be perfectly fine. I've run 450, approaching 500 horsepower through 2.5-inch exhaust on small block stuff. So I think it'd be fine. Now, obviously, if you uncork the exhaust, it's going to see a big improvement. But I don't think it's going to hurt you. It's not like you're putting 2 or 2.25-inch exhaust with mile-long glass packs on it or something. So, is that it for this video? we'll get more into it when we're talking about the other stuff in the other videos today. So, as far as my opinion goes, I think you want to keep the pipe immediately after the collectors as straight as you can for as long as you can before you have to make a bend to get around your transfer case or cross members or whatever else you got. And then you want to try to make the bends as gradual as you can. You want the, I don't concern myself, that was probably the wrong thing to say. I don't want the rest of the exhaust to be restrictive at all. I don't like sharp bends. That's the reason race style, the majority of all my cars, it comes straight out of the headers, goes back. I use the old school method of where to put the H-pipe in. Whether it's correct or not, I don't know. With the engine running and up to temperature, I'll use a crayon and I'll go back on the exhaust, and when it stops melting, that's when I put the H-pipe in. I don't know if it's right or not, but it genuinely has made a difference. The engine seems to run smoother. So you want to put some kind of an H-pipe in. After it gets past the H-pipe, it goes straight back into a set of mufflers with dumps. That's the way I've run the majority of my stuff, because I don't want any bends. I want to get the exhaust out. And if you do have to run tailpipes, just be as gradual with the bends as you possibly can over the rear end and getting it out of the car and all that kind of stuff, or truck. The less bends, especially sharp ones you have, the less restrictive your exhaust is going to be, and the more efficient it's going to be at getting it out. Get it out. Be free. That's it for this video. If I think of more stuff, I'll add it into the other ones. I think the next one may be on the EGR system. I think that's probably the next one we're going to do. Only because I told the commenter that I would. So we're going to do an EGR video. Yay! But for now, you guys get out of the shop and work on your projects. Get that exhaust on there. You have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Yes. Exhaust length does matter on some engines, primarily 2-strokes. You'll hear guys saying that they're getting up on the pipe. I'm not a 2-stroke guy. I can't even pretend to understand the science and the math and everything for how they get exhaust out and I know how 2-strokes work. I use them all the time, but I've never really messed around with them. So in some instances, exhaust length and diameter is more critical than others, and it's primarily 2-stroke stuff. But as far as 4-stroke goes, just kind of stick with my pea brain theories.